Corporate Warriors, and welcome to the Trill MBA podcast. I think we've got, what did the prophet Sean Carter say? The takeover that breaks over. This is attorney Anitra, and you have just started legal therapy. There was a time I didn't realize that I played a bigger role in this fight for civil rights. You know, I think we have a tendency to think that we're too small to make a difference. How about you? Has there been a time when you didn't think that your life, your career was big enough to make a difference in the bigger fight? That your problems were isolated? That what happens to you doesn't actually impact anyone else? That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. If I were to give it a title, I would say, it ain't over. Let's unpack that. You may know me from that podcast episode of Trill MBA. I believe it was season 3. Sis, it may be time to contact the EEOC. There, I went through the strategies that I have, and I'm the only attorney that I know who has created a proprietary system for getting you paid when work stops working. Instead of you quitting, instead of you being down and out, that there was a way to build your case from the inside out before you lost your job or your mind. Now, a lot has changed in 2 years. Been in a global pandemic. There was the murder of George Floyd. We saw protests all over this world about that. We've seen a change in American political power as a new president has gone into the White House. We've seen attempts to overthrow that power. And we've seen just outright attacks on our civil rights, specifically our voting rights in this country. And you guys have not been silent about these issues. And you certainly haven't been silent about the issues that you are going through at work. How do I know that? Because corporate warriors have been hitting me up. Felicia told you that you could reach out to me if you were having some issues, and I was open to fielding some calls and passing cases on to other attorneys. You wanted to work with attorney Anitra. And every case was like my last case because I'm shutting this thing down, I thought. I'm putting out this information so that you can protect yourselves, so I can finally be guilt-free and moving on to the next thing in my life. That was about 25 cases ago, guys. So, instead of me closing down my practice, it's actually grown because it ain't over. And we put in work. I would have to say 4 out of every 5 cases that I've taken of mainly corporate warriors coming through this podcast have already settled. We've been killing the game. I couldn't do it without you, and I needed you to remind me that it ain't over. And this is so important in this time. Why? Because I'm going to make a bold claim that the next wave of our civil rights movement is not going to take place in government. It's not going to take place even at the grassroots level, although that's important. I believe this next battleground for civil rights is playing out in corporate America. In other words, it ain't over. So let's go ahead and unpack what all of that means and how legal therapy is going to be our key to unlocking our weapons to make this movement happen. This message is for corporate warriors who want to excel in their careers, yes, but who also value their mental health. The struggle is real right now, trying to stay in the game and implement the strategies that Felicia is giving you to get promoted, while also trying not to die from the stress that we are often subjected to because of discrimination in the workplace. That stress is ravishing our bodies. And yet, because we are the corporate warriors that we are, that you are, especially as Black women, you keep chugging, you keep going, you keep fighting. So I'm here to help you equip yourselves to fight smarter, not necessarily harder. You see, the problem, at least the problem that we think is the problem, is us. When drama pops off in a workplace, our very first stop is to wonder what we did wrong, how we could have done XYZ better. But like a prophetess Naomi Osaka and Apostle Simone Biles said, y'all not going to stress us out. And more, we as Black women are getting to that point where we are no longer going to accept simply being beat up in a workplace, even as we are climbing this so-called corporate ladder. But you know what? The corporate ladder, even the corporation itself, is actually not the problem. The real problem is emotions. Emotions on both sides. You see, discrimination is an emotional transaction because discrimination is an extreme dislike or hatred for a group or type of people. That's emotional. That's emotion. One of the questions that I ask potential clients, and it always throws them off, is what is your gut feeling as to why this is happening to you at work? And they get caught off guard by that question. They say, well, I can't prove it. I'm like, nah. That's my job. You let me worry about proving it. I said that in the episode I did for you guys a couple years ago. But your job is to understand the emotional transactions that led you to calling me in the first place. Why? Because discrimination is emotional. And we can all readily agree that working in corporate America is a roller coaster of emotions. There are the highs, the finding a job that seems like the perfect fit, or being invited to apply to a job position, that interview going well, you knowing that you nailed it, that offer letter coming through, what the salary that you envisioned for yourself. You starting work and getting your work credentials, all the logins, the badges. It's exciting. And you tell your friends and your family, and it's just a proud moment of your life. But then the lows are really low, aren't they? The first time you realize that you don't have as much influence as you thought you would, or that you're supposed to have. Being thrown under the bus and then gaslighted as though that didn't just happen. The exclusion until, right? They start increasing surveillance and watching your every move. All of a sudden, you're included in every little news report that talks about things going wrong. And the end result is that you feel powerless, defeated. You feel used, and then you start getting sick and tired, and then sick and tired of being sick. It is a cycle of depression and destruction. All of that is emotional. So the question becomes, what's the best way to deal with the emotions that are being transacted, coming from you and those that you are receiving? And quite honestly, I've dedicated my career to answering that question. Because if we can figure that part out, we can then move into strategy that leverages your emotions in a positive way, while also using the other side's emotions to trap them in to what the law says is unlawful. And while we're at it, I do that so we can get a check for both of us. Okay. So what do we have to do in order to shift into seeing the workplace that way? My job is to get you to do a mind shift. If I can get you to shift your mindset, if I can get you to look at things a different way, and I do this with all of my clients, you begin to see a pathway to victory, whether it's straight up that corporate ladder or exiting the organization entirely. And in order to get your mind to wrap itself around this idea, I need to introduce to you a very specific definition of social justice that you haven't heard before because I made it up. The definition of social justice that I came up with is this. It's a compassionate response to difference. Social justice is a compassionate response to difference. This is an important idea because it helps us understand what's happening behind the discrimination. You have two people, and compassion signifies that one person has more privilege or opportunity than the other. Two people meet, one person has more privilege than the other, and there's a decision that needs to be made. I'm either going to respond to this difference, this inequality between the two of us, with support, with care, or I'm going to discriminate. Those are the decisions. And what I do with my clients is I put them in a position to make their employers choose unequivocally what side they're going to fall on. Are you going to either respond to this difference with compassion, or are you going to respond to this difference with discrimination? You know, this idea has been percolating with me for a while, even though I'm only now able to articulate it. I want to show you that I did not always understand my role in a bigger picture of social justice. In fact, I almost didn't even become an attorney. So let's unpack that. So what you may not know about me is that I was very close to never becoming attorney Anitra. I grew up in Southern California, and like a lot of people in this country, particularly in the Black community, my parents ended up getting a divorce. So I grew up in Southern California, in San Diego, California. And fortunately, even though I was the middle of 5 kids and we were being raised by our single parent, our mom, fortunately, I was plugged into a school system who saw my talents, and I was tested, given IQ tests, and eventually put into like gifted programs. And so my childhood was absolutely supported by teachers who saw my gifts for reading and for writing and for languages, and really pushed me to college and to excel in those areas. And all this was great, but I'm also a Southern California girl, and I had this dream of becoming a supermodel in Paris, France. So when you combine that with Drumline coming out in the year that I made college decisions, I decided to go to a Black college in Louisiana, major in French, and prepare for a modeling career. Fortunately, as I, maintained a great relationship with my dad and got even stronger when I left college, he was the first person to tell me to go to law school. He said, "Neatney, you really need to go to law school." And I was like, "Oh, Daddy, you just think I can do anything." And he said, "Yeah, but I specifically think you should go to law school. And unfortunately, quite a few of my professors in college said the same thing. Part of this journey of me deciding to go to law school was still combining it with my French language major and studying abroad, because then I began to set my sights on becoming a corporate lawyer for different fashion brands. So I was able to combine the best of all worlds as far as my aspirations. Well, everything was going fine until one summer I studied abroad in Belgium. I had already done half a year in Paris, France. Then I ended up going back to Europe a year later to study for the summer. And one day I was running around this museum, Musée Bellevue in Brussels. I think we were doing some sort of scavenger hunt, running from room to room, identifying items. When I stumbled into this one room that was darker and colder and more somber than all the other rooms. And as I looked at the walls, these pictures of African women and children with their limbs cut off were behind the glasses. I stopped in my tracks as I began to read what these pictures meant. Where did they come from? And I ended up finding out that King Leopold II of Belgium in the late 1800s, early 1900s, had acquired the territory of the Congo as his own personal territory. And he had sent his group of thugs over there to force the native Congolese men to excavate the naturally occurring rubber trees in the Congo. But in order to pressure and threaten them to produce more, they began cutting off the limbs of these men's wives and children. I grew up in California. I was going to a Black college, but I had personally never felt the implication of racism until that day. I knew I was Black. I loved being Black. But it was something about that realization that a response to the difference between those group of people led this King of Belgium to institute what the international community saw as a genocide. International humanitarianism was apparently born because of this situation. It's estimated that anywhere between 6 to 12 million people died because of this situation. I went to another room and I just cried and just felt like my tears were running down my arms and burning my skin. I was just so cognizant all of a sudden of being a Black girl. Here I was learning French, running around a European country. I just asked myself, what am I doing with my life? This is stupid. In that moment, I lost all confidence in myself to go to law school. I was already signed up for the test that you have to take to go to law school, the LSAT. I went back to the Americas. I didn't even show up for the test. I was like, I don't get to be an attorney. I'm irresponsible. We didn't have the word woke back then, but I was essentially saying to myself, I'm not woke enough to walk into that kind of power. So I graduated and I was being recruited by my school that I graduated from to continue working. So I ended up working in admissions. In the first podcast episode that I did for Trill MBA, I talk about being discriminated against by somebody who looked like me, all that's happening there. But eventually I'm promoted and I'm helping to run our international affairs department. And this is when my life changed yet again. Because about a year and a half into this whole situation, in walks a young woman beautiful, deep skin. She looked like the women on those pictures that I saw in Belgium. Turns out she's from Kenya. She's a student who had transferred to my school, but she transferred because the college that she was at, she could not afford to enroll in a previous semester. And for international students here on student visas, if you don't enroll in school for a particular semester, you automatically get what's called knocked out of the system or knocked out of status. So she needed to now petition the government to stay in the country because she had just received a letter saying that she was going to be deported. Apparently, all my students that I work with as an international student advisor, managing their statuses, told her, go talk to Miss McGowan. That was my name back in the day. And so she comes to me asking me for help with this thing. Asking me, somebody who has actively chosen to not go to law school, to help her petition the government to not deport her. And I said, no, please, no, I'm not touching that. I'm actually working with students who have attorneys to resolve these issues. I'm not an attorney. I don't plan to be an attorney. I wanted to be an attorney, but I'm not going to be an attorney. And she said, I know God sent me to you. I was like, don't bring him into things. Why you always gotta be bringing God into stuff? He don't always gotta be a part of the equation. You know what I'm saying? But I asked her, what's so bad about going home anyway? I mean, it's home. And she says, if I go back home without my degree, I'm going to be forced into a marriage, likely sexually assaulted repeatedly. Like, okay. Well, I guess that's not great. So yeah, I went ahead and agreed to do it begrudgingly. In fact, that file sat on my desk for a few more days than it should have. And she kept coming in and checking, and I was like, oh, okay, I need to do this thing. So one day on a Saturday, I came in and I just started researching the internet and asking her what the story was. Apparently, her uncle died in post-election clashes in Kenya the same semester that her college revoked her track scholarship. So she just didn't have funding to go into school. So I'm pulling all kind of stuff off the internet, trying to prove this case that we don't really have direct evidence for, right? And I give her this big old packet on a Saturday, everything filled out. Like, young lady, good luck. I'll be praying for you. I did my best, and I'm not a lawyer. Disclaimer. So I send her on her way. A few months later, she walks into my office, and I have so many students, I don't always remember the last thing that we spoke about, but she has this weird look on her face. And she's holding something in her hands. And as she walks closer and closer to me, I realize that she's holding the packet that we had sent off. And on the front page of that packet was a red stamp. And the stamp said, granted. I could not believe that it worked. I grabbed it. I grabbed her. We went to my office. We were hugging. We were crying. And I was just in disbelief. And then this girl looked me dead in my face, dead into the depths of my soul. And she said, Anitra, it's time for you to go now. You've got to go to law school. You've got to go. I was in law school the very next semester. So I tell that story because, number one, I realized that I would respond to difference with compassion if presented with an opportunity. That I would help my people when it came down to it. But I also tell that story so that you could understand that you play a bigger role in this as well. I thought what I was doing was insignificant. And I would have never imagined that I would become the attorney Anitra that I am today, and I am continuing to become. And as we enter into these environments in corporate America, what you go through might seem so insignificant, except to you. But I'm telling you, it's part of a larger story. Not only your ability to lift others up, but every time you stand up to an employer and you tell them that they need to treat you with dignity and respect, and according to the law, you're letting them know it ain't over. Everything that the people who came before us, our ancestors, have fought for, civil rights in this country, it ain't over. That we have laws now that protect us in the workplace that are not being executed properly. So it ain't over. That corporation after corporation stood up and said that they were not going to tolerate discrimination and racism after George Floyd died. And yet we haven't seen the changes. It ain't over. There's still a fight that has to be fought. And not even I can escape this. I didn't want to be practicing law right now. I don't know what I thought I'd be doing, selling my course and information and just being able to move on. But I can't escape the reality of this fight. And neither can you. If you're listening to me right now, you are a corporate warrior called for this time. And the more of us who show up equipped with the strategy to work our way up the corporate ladder, but also get paid and make a statement that we have to be reckoned with when it doesn't work out that way, you're part of this thing. It ain't over. I'll close by saying this. Dr. Martin Luther King, everybody likes to talk about Dr. King, but the point behind his nonviolent protest was this idea of the beloved community. That basically, by going through the nonviolent route, we could turn our oppressors into friends and brothers one day. And I'm here to tell you that the strategies I'm going to share with you not only protect you, not only can get you paid, but they're allowing people who are currently oppressing us to make a decision towards compassion to difference instead of discrimination, an opportunity to become a friend and to become a brother. Like I said, it ain't over. We've got work to do, and the next civil rights movement is happening where you work. This is Legal Therapy with attorney Anitra for Trill MBA, the TakeOver. I'll talk to you next time as we begin to learn a specific strategy that can position you to take advantage of the laws, very predictably, that are put in place to protect you. Until next time, peace.
The Trill MBA Show is a Fair World Corp. LLC production. Executive produced by Felicia and Rose Inuha. Sound design and editing by Chris Mann with Podshaper. Theme music is Kick Push by Ryan Little. Keep it trill every day, y'all.